much for joining me on Being Indispensable. My name's Liz Van Vliet. We're all dispensable. I know that better than anyone. I'm a breast cancer survivor. But that doesn't mean that we can't invest in ourselves to improve the skills and capabilities that are going to help us stand out and be perceived as indispensable. Being indispensable is also about the being side of the equation. Because if we're not looking after ourselves and our own well-being, then we have no hope of showing up as indispensable in the workplace. Hello, lovely listeners. Welcome to episode 62 of Being Indispensable. Well, today I wanted to talk to you about a topic that is becoming increasingly relevant, I think, to the executive assistants that I talk to, and that is getting clarity around what it is that makes you indispensable. Now, what do I mean by that? So, this thought has come about for a couple of reasons. It's sort of the correlation of a number of things, a number of conversations that I've been having recently. One of them came about as a result of a conversation that I was having with an executive assistant where she was sharing with me her anxiety about the fact that her manager had recently been promoted and was going to be basically his headcount was being moved from, reporting into Australia from a management perspective to reporting into the Asia Pacific level. Now, as a result of that, she was being left hanging, in a sense. She was waiting to hear, first off, whether or not the new reporting manager the new bucket that he was going to be going across to report into would be able to be extended to incorporate her as well. And secondly, she was facing the prospect that if that wasn't the case, she was going to possibly be reporting to the replacement for her boss, or B, she was going to be looking for a new role in the organisation. So you can imagine the anxiety. What made this even more difficult for her, though, was that as I questioned her, it became clear that she actually couldn't tell me what her boss found indispensable about her. What was it about her that he couldn't do without? She couldn't answer that question. Nor could she answer the question about what, if I, when I asked her to describe to me what value she brought to the table, basically, what is your elevator pitch? She didn't have one. And even more troubling was the fact that as we drilled down into it, I discovered that this executive assistant, who is very experienced and extremely capable, was doing a lot of things that her boss was not even aware of. She was making his life so much easier in so many ways, but he was unaware of many of those things. Well, actually, I'd say more than many of those things, most of those things. Is this something that's resonating with you? I'd be surprised if it's not. Now, where this also came up was recently, that if you've been listening to recent episodes, I was thrilled to be part of Executive Secretary Live a few weeks ago. And one of the speakers was Melba Duncan. She was actually the last speaker of the day. And she gave as expected, a brilliant presentation. She had everyone captivated. She had everyone literally glued to their seats. At one point, she made the statement. She said, "You're here to manage things they don't even know you're managing." Well, that got my attention, because that to me is exactly the dilemma that this executive assistant is dealing with, that I had been coaching a few weeks before that. The dilemma of being in a situation where your value is the fact that you're managing things that they don't even know are needing to be managed. In other words, you're managing things that are effectively invisible. So that begs the question, how are you getting recognised for those things that you're doing that are invisible to your manager? And could you be paid more? Could you be more secure in your employment? Could you be promoted? Could you have the option of moving to a different role that is, pays more, is more satisfying, all of the things that, motivate us to change jobs, if your value was clearly articulated? So that brings me full circle back to my original question. If I asked you, what is it that makes you indispensable? Can you answer that question? Now, when I was sitting down with this EA that I've mentioned, I actually drew her a diagram. I love drawing. So my drawing was of an iceberg. And it was a very simple drawing of an iceberg, a bit flashier than just a triangle, a little bit more shape to it. And, we had the part of the iceberg, think, a la the Titanic, the above the surface and the below the surface. And the section that is above the surface, which is smaller and less visible, is the part that represents what you're actually being paid for. And the section that is far, far greater, that is below the surface, are all the things that you're doing that people are not even aware of. And that more than likely your remuneration is not actually recognising. And furthermore, that you're not actually being valued for. So, my challenge to you is to think about that question. What does your iceberg look like? What's above the line in terms of things that are clearly articulated, that were probably in your job description, for example? And then what are those things that are below the surface? That enormous amount of things that people are not even aware that you are doing. And finally, I want to pose a question to you that I posed in the presentation that I gave also a couple of weeks ago when I was a guest at a very large bank in the Sydney CBD, presenting to a group of wonderful personal assistants, executive assistants. And I'm not mentioning the name because I have not spoken to the bank and gotten approval for disclosing who it was that I was presenting to. So sorry for waffling on. Anyway, back to the point. The point was that I went in there to do a presentation on personal branding for executive assistants and about the importance of taking control of your personal brand. And the question I asked to the ladies in the room was, when your manager introduces you, what do they say? Yes, I've left a little bit of silence there because I think if the reaction in the room that day was anything to go by, that there's probably a couple of things going through your mind right now. One, you have no idea what they say other than just to simply introduce you as their assistant. B, they may not actually be able to introduce you at all without saying something that is, possibly a bit offensive and hurtful in a way that, so-and-so helps keep me organised, which really typifies exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about this iceberg metaphor. Or 3, you can't actually think about or articulate what it is that you want them to say. And that's my challenge for you. Now, the good news is that this topic of personal branding for executive assistants and this whole concept of identifying your iceberg are all things that are part of my online course that I'm in the process of launching. So, if these topics have intrigued you and you are interested in hearing about my course when it becomes available, please go to the following link and register your email address. Even if you're currently registered to my Being Indispensable email mailing list, it would be great if you could register for this specific list because it's the one that I'm going to be mailing people on specifically regarding this online course. The link it's a bit.ly link, bit.ly/indispensable me. So once again, bit.ly/indispensable me. And I will put the link in the show notes for this episode, which you can find on my website at the top of the podcast page under latest episode, so that if you haven't got the ability to write that link down as you're listening, you can go to the show notes and access the link from there. So just to remind you of the wonderful Melba Duncan's quote or statement, that you're here to manage things they don't even know you're managing. And that, in her opinion, is your core fundamental value. But if they don't even know what you're managing, how can they possibly value you? That's what I want you to think about. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.